Hi Danny, Grace and Jude. This is how to manage balanced meals. So I spent a lot of time in the 3 balanced meals part of the foundations discussing that 80 to 90% of the meal choices need to be balanced meals, which is basically half a plate of veg, quarter of carbs, quarter of protein, with maybe something like fruit or milk as well. Examples for breakfast, I would never personally, and I wouldn't expect, I don't think Grace and Jude you to ever have breakfast cereals with type 1 diabetes because it's almost impossible to manage those, although we can try in the high carb meals, but something like porridge with full cream milk and nuts is just about possible. Something like eggs or fish on toast would be an easy way to do it, or cheese on toast with tomatoes. That would be a better match of slowing the glucose being absorbed. Obviously standard meals, as I've discussed, half a plate of veg, quarter carbs, quarter protein, and snacks again, thinking things like whole fruit and nuts, or nut butter on toast, whole yogurt with nuts. So you've got a mixture of fat, protein and carbs, therefore it's going to slow the absorption and give you a chance to beat the fact that there's no insulin or very little insulin in the portal vein. So trying to keep to these type of meals 3 times a day is going to make diabetes very easy to manage. So this is what happens when you have a balanced meal. You have a balanced meal, this is the glucose absorption in the green. You can see even the glucose absorption from a balanced meal is still a little bit faster than how insulin works. It peaks at about 90 minutes and it's finished at sort of 3.5 hours. Fast-acting insulin peaks at about 2 hours, is finished by 4 to 5 hours. So you're still going to get a slight glucose rise, although nothing like a high-carb meal. And again, as we discussed, that is because there is a lack of insulin in the portal vein for people with type 1 diabetes. I won't labour that anymore. I think you've got the picture by now. So what we need to do is either slow the digestion of the food down a little bit, or again, speed the insulin up. So pretty simply, again, you've got the same issue of insulin absorption. What can we do to make sure this insulin gets absorbed quicker? You use SET. Pretty simply, just like we did with the high carb meals, is you check the glucose value, you check the arrow, and you give the insulin before the meal depending on the time. So for example, if we now have a level, it's crept up to 11, and it's an arrow even trending straight up, you're looking at giving the insulin 40 minutes before. So that 11, which is going up, goes 11, 12, 13, comes back down and then starts trending down to 7 or 8 by the time you're eating 40 minutes later, and the glucose level stays nice and steady. If you only give the insulin 10 to 15 minutes before when you're 11 and rising, you're going to be going 16, 17, 18, 19 before you come back down. So again, key tip, check the CGM 45 minutes before eating, and that will allow you to know when you're going to give the insulin before a meal. If you get into that type of habit, diabetes is going to be very easy to manage. And again, the T from SET is making sure there's 10 minutes worth of activity after eating, so that again, you're going to push the insulin that's been administered around to the muscle so it can work faster, and also there'll be more blood flow to the injection site so the insulin gets absorbed a little bit quicker too. So using those strategies, count the carbs accurately, choosing whole food choices, adding as many vegetables as possible, a normal bolus 15 minutes before or based on SET, and then 10 minutes of activity after. You can see now the insulin goes in 20 minutes before, pretty much a flat profile. The activity, that's almost a perfect, that's better than someone without diabetes that you can effectively manage. So that's the beauty of 3 balanced meals. There's Jude in the background shouting, must be looking forward to his balanced meals. So putting that all together, so pulling this all together in one easy schematic to see, this is what happens when you have a balanced meal when you give insulin just to eating. You get a good profile, but you still go possibly up to 10 millimoles or 180 milligrams per deciliter, because even with a balanced meal, the glucose appears slightly quicker than the insulin works. If you can choose more whole grain, more vegetables, give the insulin 15 minutes before, or depending on the glucose level based on SET, 10 minutes of activity afterwards, you can see a near normal profile afterwards. So again, getting into good habits, checking the CGM 45 minutes before eating, having balanced meals, making sure you do 10 to 15 minutes activity after eating. So Grace and Jude at the moment, that's a mixture for us of, we play out in the garden on the trampoline, we play out the front, just playing football, we set up slides and we mess about in the front room. Anything for 10, 15, 20 minutes after eating just pushes the blood around the body. Now me as an adult, this is my typical day. 3 balanced meals, 3 insulin doses 15 to 20 minutes before eating, 3 lots of 10 to 15 minutes activity after eating, you get almost 100% time in range. That's how easy it is if you can set up your lifestyle such as that. Obviously, that's not all day, every day, 365 days a year, but that is 80 to 90% of the time. When you have a high carb meal, I use the strategies we discussed on the high carb meal. When we have a high fat meal, I'll discuss that shortly after. But pretty much keeping it sensible, 3 balanced meals with 10 to 15 minutes activity after eating makes diabetes really easy to manage. And not only that, it's extremely healthy for a person with or without type 1 diabetes. So as a family approach, that's what we choose to do. And Grace and Jude, that's what we push you to do. Obviously, Grace and Jude being sort of 1, 3, you'll soon be 5, 6 and 7. You're not just going to have 3 balanced meals, and you're not going to do 10 to 15 minutes activity after every meal. But if we can mainly have 3 balanced meals, you can have a high carb snack within here and get the activity in certainly after breakfast on the way to nursery or school, and certainly after the evening meal. We'll get 80 to 90% of time in range fairly easily with that type of approach. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but getting into good habits is something that will make diabetes very easy to manage. And not only that, it's great for your health now and in the future also. And as a family approach, it's something that you really need to think about to do. So again, really need to think about, it's important that I respect to have low levels of insulin in the portal vein, and you can't outrun a high processed carb diet. So start the insulin before eating, 10 minutes of activity after eating, as natural of food choices as possible. Don't get caught into what's normal, because what's normal now is eating crap. 3 balanced meals for adults and kids, an extra snack. That's pretty keeping it simple. The food, if you follow that 80 to 90% of the time, getting 80 to 90% time in range will be a breeze. See you next into how to manage high fat meals.